Hey Kristin, I wanted to make this video real quick. I appreciate you taking the time to humor me and listen to all the things that we talked about. And just like the last time, I asked everyone to tell me why CPAP wouldn't work because it was bothering me. And if I knew why, then I could get it off my mind. But it turns out we were right. CPAP's worked. By the way, there's a way to retask a CPAP machine to actually work as a ventilator. Just an FYI, I saw a video on it. They just reprogrammed it. Anyhow, this is the other question I was asking you about the bronchial ventilation and stuff like that. And this is the reason why. So I just want you to tell me why this won't work. I tried reading your stuff, but the lingo is a little over my head. So anyhow, first things first, I'm going to tell you stuff that you already know, just to get where I'm thinking and what parts I'm focusing on in the thought of this concept. If you use a snorkel, and you can breathe in and breathe out and exchange oxygen for carbon dioxide, or the other way around. Things are fine, but if this snorkel gets larger and the space inside the snorkel is larger than your lung volume, then the air you exhale comes right back in, and you don't get an effective change of oxygen carbon dioxide ratio. You just keep breathing back in your own carbon dioxide and not getting any new oxygen. So the thing is that the same principle works here with these trach tubes. With these trach tubes, there's a one-way valve. I'm telling you stuff I know you already know. But this trach valve, let's say this is the inlet, the gas comes in, and it's one way. The gas can't come back, and then the lung gets filled, and then when it comes back out of a one-way tube that takes the gas away from another place. And this T-valve is always as close to the patient as possible, so that they're not mixing all these gases. They're getting as few mixed gases back into that the patient is breathing back in. So, so when a person breathes, and the thing is that when a person breathes in, but from what I'm reading, like a person with COPD, is that they have to change their breath cycle because they have trouble exhaling and they have to get all the carbon dioxide out. So they change the cycle ratio of, instead of the same amount of time as breathing in as breathing out, a 1-to-1 ratio, they can go as high as a 1-to-3 ratio, where they're spending more time exhaling to get the gas out than getting the air in. It's not that they can't, getting the air in is no good for them, it's just more important to get the gas out. So there's a whole time between the gas tide coming into the lung, and then there's a time to wait for it to all expel. Not that the lung wouldn't love to have a new supply of oxygen sooner. So with a regular intubation, as far as I understand it, I'm not assuming I know everything, but with the regular intubation, it goes down into the trachea, but not into the bronchial tubes. And so this gas comes here, gas gets sent from here, and then, the trach tube enters somewhere just before the bronchial split. And then the lungs inflate, and then they wait, and then the lungs make the exchange, and they flex, and they inflate, and then they let the stuff back out. But there's this whole gas exchange, this whole thing in between here and here, where there's stuff cycling in and cycling out, and there's a time between getting fresh air in that they have to take a break to get the old air out. So my idea is that, from what I can read from what little I understood of the paper you sent me, is that if we took this trach tube and we ran a single tube that we split down. Now this is a tube inside of a tube. This would now not be gas. This would be an additional tube inside of the trach tube. That would be a T that breaks off, and it would be an oxygen supply line. But what this design would do is it would send oxygen into the lungs continuously. It wouldn't take a break. And as the O2 went in here and turbulated around, it would have nowhere to go except out through this tube that this tube is inside of, and the gas would be pushed out. So the gas is coming into the lung, it's maximizing the safe pressure to inflate the lungs, but then the gas has nowhere to go except for the place of least pressure, which is the bigger tube, the oxygen delivery tubes, is sitting inside it. Does that make sense? So oxygen comes in here, builds up pressure, and then gets forced out the outer jacket tube, that is the exhale tube. So this area would be constantly getting flushed with fresh oxygen and at the same time pumping old carbon dioxide out. But this is the thing, I don't know if the lungs need to flex for other functions, like say interstitial fluid or some kind of wringing out of the O2 out of the alveoli or whatever. But the thing is if this inner tube is filling these lungs and it's making its way out through the exhaust larger tube, what you can do is you can kind of pinch off or slow the exhaust, just like a PEEP valve. And what it would do is when you slowed it, that PEEP valve would obviously keep a minimum amount of pressure, but you could also adjust the PEEP valve or somewhere other place where it holds the thing closed for a certain amount of time, and then it expands the lungs. But it'll expand it, and it'll have an immediate effect right there immediately. But even so, even if it's restricting it and it's filling the lungs are getting filled because there's more pressure air coming in than it's letting out. It's still only going in one direction. It's all coming in, but it's all flushing out. And so there would be no break of this back and forth that the lungs are doing, that are going all the way up through the trachea to get out of the body. And there would be no pause or, pause in the change of tide. It would be a constant flow of oxygen bathing the alveoli and stuff like that. And so I'm just wondering why it is that if you had the gas here, which would directly stimulate this area, it would directly mix this area. And if you flex the pressure so the alveoli come in and come out, the alveoli would just have be little pumps that would just pump right into the main area. So the alveoli, are flexing, getting bigger and getting smaller, but they're just kind of squeezing out the O2. But as the pressure changes, when you give it a break to let it collapse and then expel some of its CO2 and make its way out. So anyways, I hope that's clear. But I just see a way that maybe you can just keep fresh oxygen pouring into the lung, raise the pressure of that oxygen pouring into the lung to expand the lung if the alveoli need to contract and expand. But there'd always be peak pressure, but there would also be a max pressure to inflate the lungs. Or if that's not a big deal, if it doesn't need to flex in and out, all it needs to do is just have an exchange, and that's the only reason you're letting the lungs do all the work is because no one else is making it do the exchange. You could make the exchange happen with the pressure of the air coming in, and you wouldn't have to stop the air coming in to wait for it to exhale and come out. So anyhow, that's my idea. I don't know. I just got to know why this won't work. If you can let me know why it doesn't work, then maybe I can think of a way that it will work, or I can, like the thing with the CPAP, I can just give up and focus on something else. But anyhow, I really appreciate the time you've taken to write me back and give me answers in detail. And I'm really glad that, we all agree and that some lives will be saved from the CPAP ideas. And what I really want people to do, I want the word out that people will use the CPAPs at home before they even get a trip to the hospital, that they'll just give it to people that are at risk before they even are in real danger. Just if they know that they're having labored breathing, they'll use the CPAP, and like you said, it'll keep the alveoli open, and it'll keep this whole downward spiral domino effect from even happening in the first place. But I was just wondering if this could work. It could make the lungs maybe, 100% oxygen makes the gas almost 5 times more effective. But if there was no tide in and out, it might even be 2 or 3 times more effective. If there's you don't need that whole compression time, or you just need a little bit of compression time, you'll have a lot more lack of slack tide or in between. So anyways, let me know what you think. Thanks.